Attention gamers, I'm back with another video game recommendation to get remastered. Somebody started a petition for a video game to get remastered called Crash Bash. In this game, you have to play it starts with when Aku Aku and Uka Uka, the two twin brothers that are arguing, their bickering has been going on about who is the strongest, and they had to find a way to do that, to settle this. But Uka Uka suggested that they should just fight over it. But Aku Aku refused and said that the ancients would not allow it. You must not be. There must be a better way to solve this. And then Uka Uka suggested a contest. Good against evil. His players against his. And very well, it was settled. They would have a contest to see who becomes to see who that could settle their argument. And the first one they summoned was Crash. Aku Aku summoned was Crash Bandicoot. Then next, but for the first player in Aku Aku's players team, then Uka Uka's first summon was Dr. Neo Cortex. But then, as they both appeared, they welcomed him to their humble home, and him and their friends have been summoned for a battle between good and evil. Summoned for a contest between good and evil. But there was one, and he said, may the best player win. But Aku Aku noticed this was not a fair contest. He had way too many players. And it must be even. The contest must be evenly matched. He must surrender 2 of his players. And when Uka Uka heard that, to make it even, he went, very well, choose. And he chose Tiny and Dingodile to be on it, to be on his team. But then as the games began, throughout the game, you have to play a series of games to get near to the boss. In the first you'll end up entering a warp room. And there you have to pick the very first game you have to play. Starting with Crash Ball, Polar Panic, Pogo Painter, Jungle Bash, and actually, yeah, Crash Ball, Polar Panic, Pogo Painter, and Jungle Bash. And finally, Papu Pummel is the first boss of this warp room of the Papu Papu of Insanity Island. But in order to get there, you have to win trophies and gems throughout each game, throughout each set of games. and and it's one of the most, but but there is one problem. In Polar Panic, you have to be really careful when you, because there's some kind of ray device that lets you pick either an anvil that puts a symbol that floats right over your player's head, and it has a limited amount of time until it happens. If it's a weight, if it's a 500-pound weight, it'll summon a 500-pound, and you don't want to get that. It'll flatten you, it'll take you out of the game if you didn't get rid of it in time, off of you, in time for the rest of them. This is why you gotta pass it on to other people, to the other players, so they get it, not you. And plus, if that if that ray device gives you a thunderbolt, you could shock your opponents and push them right into the water. But if you get shrunk or grown, you're in trouble. You could get easily pushed off that way. But then, when you enter Pogo Painter, you have to get a really big amount of points during the time being. And when you win, you end up, each game, you win a series of trophies. But you need to also collect the gems and power crystals in those levels. But as you move on to the Papu Papu, you have to be careful on him. He smacks the board. He smacks the battlefield with his staff. And then later, causing a lot of rocks, causing the tiles to move from a very hot over a hot lava. And what you have to do is stop many crashes after once he has a fiery ring around him, you can't hit him. And once you defeat the mini crashes, he just laughs, it drops, and he's laughing so hard he forgets what's happening. Until you throw a huge stone crate or dynamite or TNT crate at him. Once you throw it right at him, he hits again. And then loses health. But then, as you hit him, he summons mini crashes twice to protect himself, to try to take you out. Unless if you get rid of them, you'll still be able to take on the Papu Papu. But then you have to be really careful once you defeat him. And after a few tries of beating him by throwing crates, he smacks the battlefield again, but it knocks a big stone hanging over his head, and it crushes him and it flattens him. And you win the first battle, the very first boss battle. But then, as you enter the next warp room, you'll have to go against another boss. In the second warp room, it's a frozen realm. But it's an iceberg area. But you have to be really careful. But then you have to be really careful, because once you have to collect all the gems, all the trophies in Beach Ball, Tilt Panic, Pogo a Go-Go. Yeah. Then you have to do Tank. You have to do Desert Fox. You have to use Desert Fox. And Space Bash. And then Space Bash. And then Space Bash. Yeah. But in Pogo a Go-Go, there is one problem. You have to paint a square to achieve points, not break crates, like in Pogo Painter. You have to be really careful. Once you get the most points, you win. But then you have to go against but until Panic, there is something you don't know. As you're busy trying to push someone over and trying to avoid getting smashed by a huge weight, a fish comes onto the iceberg. It's tilting as you're playing, and you gotta really avoid the edge. And then as a fish jumps up, it's actually a walrus jumping onto it, causing you to climb up to a higher surface to keep yourself from falling over. And in Space Bash, as you throw stuff like dynamite and nitro, actually you can't touch nitro because it explodes on impact when it's touched. But as you're really careful, you gotta be careful. Dynamite puts a hole in the floor where you're standing. So you gotta be really, really careful not to... You gotta be really, really careful not to touch it. Not to fall down any of those holes. Or you lose. And the one left standing is the winner. But then, after when you collect all the characters, after you collect all of the trophies, gems, and power crystals in it, you have to face a giant angry polar bear with his own submarine and his prototype mechanical bears. But then if you're not really careful, you just gotta push over the mechanical bears. As you do it, you've got to get a missile and aim for the big bear's head. And aim for the giant polar bear's head. But you gotta be careful. If you miss, he laughs at you. But then, after defeating him, you move on to the next warp room, to the next set of games. Then, you end up in the next one, where there is engine ballism. Then you go against, then second, it's Snowbat, and you gotta do El Pogo Loco, actually Melt Panic, then Snow Bash, and then El Pogo Loco, then Metal Fox, and then crash dash. But then you gotta be really careful. Once you're in engine ballism, you gotta watch out for, you gotta beware of Engine's attacks. Dr. Engine's attacks. But then, later, you have to, in Snow Bash, whatever you do, don't wake the penguin up. If you do, he'll spin, and throw all the stuff at you. And so what you have to do is watch out for that attack. But, then in El Pogo Loco, you have to crush crates and draw and paint squares. But beware of Ripperoo's. Walking stick that makes flat dynamite appear. But then later, after you then you move on to Metal Fox, which is where you have to battle. Which is where you have to use your skills in the tank, like in the level of Desert Fox, and use it against, shoot your opponents, and take them out. But there is something you don't know in the Metal Fox. The lines in the middle keep changing into different pathways, and you can get stuck that way. And you gotta really avoid being shot by your opponents. And after you use the tank and defeat them, you win. But in Crash Dash, you have to really win a race. And if you win the race, you're a winner. But you gotta be really careful. In this next level, you gotta go against the Komodo brothers, the Komodo Dragon brothers, against a super strong weapon that is of a tank. This looks similar to a tank. After you destroy the first, second, and layers of the big machine, they come out with their tanks, and you have to defeat the Komodo brothers. And after you defeat them, you move on to the final warp room. After collecting the trophies, gems, and power crystals. But then when you make it to the last level, last warp room, you gotta be really careful on this one. Because there's sky balls. Iceberg Panic. And then later, you move on. But in this final panic game, you have to throw bombs at your opponents. And they're nothing but skating. And you have to either push them over or blow them up with a bomb. But then next, you have to really take on... You need Padlock Painter, which is another kind of pogo painter, but a lot different. Next, you do a toxic dash. You do water dash. And it's where you have to use whales and then win the race. But then you have to go against in the next Fox game and take on your opponents and everything. But you also gotta be really careful. Once after you Drain Bash, which you gotta be really careful in all these in this one. But then you've gotta go again Toxic Dash. You have to avoid toxic creatures that are in the middle. But then later you finally get to where the big boss is. The final boss is Anoxide. If you're playing good, Aku Aku hides all the crystals. If you're a player in Aku Aku's team, he hides the crystals, and you find out, but there was a catch. You find out the truth that the contest is not what you think it is. It was actually Uka Uka's plan to try to take over worlds. But then, as he hides the crystals, you have to go against the evil villain Nitrous Oxide. Anoxide. But as you travel throughout his own area, shooting meteors and bombs that guard, you end up landing on his planet, playing a game with a ball and your ship. And after getting him into his goal, you'll defeat him. But as you defeat him, you win. But then something worse happens. After you defeat all the bosses, Uka Uka is furious that all of his players have failed. He thought they were cheating, but apparently no one was cheating. It was him that was cheating. He was planning to use the power crystals for evil. But then, once Aku Aku had locked him up in a temple prison after failing, after his victorious victory of the contest. And that's why this video game needs to be remastered. This person really needs your help to get this game remastered. Bye for now until the next video game I will tell that needs to be remastered.